1, 2. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. This is very unusual setup, I think, for PyCon, right? Panel discussion. So bear with us. So maybe we start with, are people answering those questions? Because maybe I'll ask them here and so we can gauge the experience of the audience and what they might be interested in. So maybe I'll ask first question is like, are you maintaining your own infrastructure in some sense?
Just raise your hand.
Raise your hand, please. Right, like VPS, something. Oh, cool.
Cool.
Plenty. Are you working on a SaaS or a PaaS product, like software as a service, sort of web apps and stuff like that? Yeah, some cool.
Yeah.
And how many of you have experience being on call? As in, you know, if things go down, you are the one who's being called in. Cool. Good crowd for this one. So is everybody, maybe I'll start with the definition of the you build it, you run it first, which is sort of, it's a philosophy, it's a term that was coined by AWS CTO, someone like that, back in 2006. And it's a philosophy where those who are developing the software are also responsible for maintaining it, running it, and responding to any issues. Basically own it from the very beginning to the very end. In some cases, even being on the customer support. So that's so maybe let's start with introductions now. Like who's going to talk about this topic? So first is
Please welcome our guest that we are hosting the show. First, can you, Nadia, introduce yourself?
Okay.
Oh, perfect. Hi, I'm Nadia. I know two of these gentlemen, the one that actually run the You Build It, You Run It podcast. I'm not sure if they're going to be talking about it, but please check it out if they won't. But anyway, my name is Nadia. I am a site reliability engineer, which is a tongue twister, but it's a position, it's a role that I found my calling in, and it was about 8 years ago when I joined these two gentlemen in a startup called YBYR, and I started helping them break things. And I have been in this role for, as I said, 8 years. Startup got acquired by Oracle, so now I'm in a corporation in slightly different teams, but I try to apply those principles. I most definitely build it and run it, so I know the pain points. I have been in multiple different roles before I landed in here, starting with technical writer, project manager, developer. So I've been there and I landed here, and I'm very happy. So looking forward to discussing things.
Okay, right.
Karel.
Hello.
Yeah, you go ahead.
Should I go ahead? Yeah?
Yes.
So my name is Karel. I'm a developer primarily. I've been working with Ruby and Rails for a very long time. Back then, actually, I had no choice. I had to run it, also build it, also run it. Spent a couple of years writing chef cookbooks and stuff like that. Then I joined Elastic, the company behind Elasticsearch, where I was doing Ruby and Go as well. And strangely enough, I joined the infra team there. So yeah, I have a couple of stories from that part of my life.
Maybe so your turn, Ladia.
Yeah, I am Ladislav. I am started as webmaster many years ago, and after that a developer. And as Nadia mentioned, 8 years ago we joined startup YBYR, and I was leading their SRE team for that almost 7-8 years before I left Oracle. And now I am working in Pure Storage as developer. It's very nice work, again, not be manager and working as IC.
So, and I'm Vilibald. Most people call me Vilda. And they kind of like introduced me halfway. Like I worked with those guys for quite a while. I'm still in Oracle, still doing cloud. And currently they call it architect, which usually translates to some stuff plus engineer, and I did logging there. I did various other projects, and before I was developer for quite a long time. Notable things is maybe route like navigation mappy.cz back in 2004 or something. That scared me a lot when people started using it. And I actually started being, my first job was being on call. So I started with the run it part and didn't really do much of the development. And there was cashier systems in Carrefour. That's like a French Tesco or something like that. So maybe now introductions are done, everybody now knows who we are dealing with. Now maybe let's start with the first sort of topic, which we selected as a good idea to start with, and that's what does the You Build It, You Run It bring for developers? What are the advantages, disadvantages? Is it a good idea? Like, why even bother with it? What it brings when you bother with your own infrastructure, logging, and trying to solve all these things? I don't know who wants to go first. Any ideas?
So I just have a very quick one.
Yep.
I mean, to me, this is the way I have been doing things for quite a long time, and what it ultimately brings me is the ownership of the service. So I am responsible for what I wrote. I can interact with the customers. I can see how they're using the product. I can improve it so that it's actually useful for them. So to me, just sticking with You Build It gets rid of a whole lot of other advantages or good things that it can bring. So ownership and making sure that I'm there all the way from the initial idea to how we're maintaining, how we're running things, and how we're improving so that it's useful, so that it actually works.
So I kind of misheard the question. Can you very shortly repeat that, Milda?
Yes. Why do it this way? What it brings to a developer when they also do the rest?
Yeah, like why do it at all? Why not just build it? Why also run it?
Yeah, hire someone to run it, do everything else, right? Like, why not?
So I think sometimes you have no choice, right? That was my case. Back before Elastic, I was working at a monitoring system for social media called Social Insider here in Czech Republic, and we were just 2 developers. There was no DevOps team, no SREs, no nothing like that. So I had no choice. I think that what Nadia said, resonates with me, because then you can really understand how the service really works, how the different components are interconnected. Right. Some people, when you say you're an architect, they think it's a 4-letter word, right? Although it has more letters. When you also do infrastructure, you can actually, touch the architecture itself. So that's a big thing for me.
Ladia, what's your take on it before I dive in?
I always see that ownership as main thing. That I worked in classic companies, for example, in LMC, that we have that quite different. We was developers, we working on jobs.cz and similar sites, and we have that sysadmins who deploying things, and we usually throw the code over the wall to them, and they was responsible for on-calls only. And I really hate it in that way that I always have that ownership. I was always care about how the deploy was and discuss with sysadmins where was issues and other things. But that was common practice. Yeah? I didn't see quite a lot of changes. But after I left LMC and joined the startup, that was only 6 engineers, yeah, and we have to done everything. And that was that great things that was Heroku as PaaS quite new, but was very successful in the days, and we using for deploying. Yeah? You just git push your application and you run it, and it was very easy to get it as developer. Yeah? I used for my hobby project before I joined the startup, And I have plenty experience with that, and I really like it that we don't need care about machines itself, yeah. And that was more first touching 8 years ago with cloud, yeah. And later we get AWS, and we have some services in AWS. We was one of first users for Lambdas, for example, in AWS, and we have big issues with that service. That it was very early stage, and we find many pitfalls there, and but was super good for that our use case for parsing API specs, and was quite nice. And during all the time, that ownership and communicate with our customers via customer support and all the things. If something broken, we fix in a few days or in a few hours, and it was a really good experience for me, and that's why I like it. You build it, you run it.
Yeah, go
Sorry,
ahead.
if I may, what Lade was telling reminded me of the API times, and there's one more thing that is very important to me, that it brings the whole team together. So we were actually talking about it earlier today, that our CTO, a person who's normally supposed to, do this all high-level stuff, he was on call. He was doing platform on call, and all of us hated it when he was on the shift, because he would come up with all these improvements that we have to do. So he would cut like 15 tickets after a 12-hour shift. But it really brought us together like a team, so that it wasn't important. The titles were not important. What was important is that all of us were working to get the product running, to get the service going, and it wasn't important if you were a junior who joined a few months ago, or if you were one of the people who founded the company. It was all equal in this, and I really enjoyed that.
So because I started the way I started, being basically first on call, I actually got high on being able to affect things super fast. And if I seen a problem, I could fix it straight away and don't, wait, cut the ticket, and 3 weeks pass and nothing is happening. Very frustrating. And I also made the other experience the other way around, where I delivered something and then 3 months later I received a ticket that something's not working, and I was like, I don't remember, right? Like, I'm lost. So I think that from my perspective, the thing that brings the best value is, or the biggest value, is the feedback you get and the chance to actually affect things like fairly fast, right? And so I see a good question. Wouldn't this this curious child asking? I'm picking this one up because I think it's to the topic. Wouldn't this ruin the best man for the job principle in big projects and cause knowledge guru issue? Been there, done that. And I think the answer to this is, if you specialize, you become siloed, and then you, in my experience, you don't see the issues anymore, right? Like, oh, I'm working on this, I'm doing that, and I don't care about the rest. Some of the things are really subtle, and from the let's say specialist perspective, everything's 100% fine, but then running that thing that somebody developed and it works perfectly fine on the machine might be a horrible experience, but there's no way how to convey that, right? So I think everybody who's if you're delivering something, you should feel the pain if it doesn't work. So that's my take.
Yeah, I think that it's a valid question, but it's a question of scale. It depends on how big the project is. Evidently, for a super large project, like monstrous project like Facebook, you probably want to have like a dedicated team who maintains the infrastructure. Although I think one thing comes to my mind, that one thing changed this landscape quite a lot, and that's actually Docker. Because Docker changed things, how you run it, how you build it, and kind of mesh those two together. Because it's normal these days to just, run even on your own notebook, the application as a Docker container, build it, run it, like in the commands themselves. So that's been a big change, I would say. Over the years, I kind of was involved in this.
Yeah, in positive and negative both.
Yeah, of course.
That's putting Docker images that have 1 gigabyte, and pushing over network is quite painful. I remember that from Oracle. Yeah.
So actually, to the point of that there are teams running infrastructure, that's totally correct that the large organizations do it. I work in one where similar things are happening. There are like different teams and you have to work with them. But usually what happens is they are establishing this feedback loop somehow still. So if it really, really sucks and it's your fault, they're going to push the pain your direction, right? And that's usually the way you achieve the best. From my perspective. Otherwise, because as I said, being on both sides, I've seen like, yeah, I'm feeling the pain, but there's no way how I can tell the devs, hey, it really is wrong, it really is bad, right? Like you can complain, but nobody cares because it's not affecting them, right?
Yeah, and from my experience, for example, in that start of API with 6 developers was every 6 weeks you have on call for a whole week, and that wasn't just infrastructure, but you make review all pull requests and deploying them. And from my experience was that if you are responsible for deployment and for on-call that night, you was very careful to make the review correct. If missing test, you push back. You retest everything and be very careful what you putting into production and which quality you getting. And that pain that you just forgot on something or that's okay, I trust this person, that will be okay. That give you quite the headache that you wake up in 2 a.m. And if you wake up 3 times in week, 2 a.m., that's very painful experience that correspond back to your quality of review your pull requests.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, exactly. I'm looking at the questions and I think they are like sort of aligning what the topics we wanted to discuss anyway. So one of the topics, and it's like what to do about developers who want the run it part is way out of their comfort zone and could cause them a lot of stress. We had a similar topic in like what are the skill sets, what are the attitudes, what are the like mindset for, what are usually important in order to succeed in this paradigm, right? Like, because usually people, good developers, but then the rest. What do you think? What are the...
Can I?
What's the stuff?
Okay. This is quite important. During my time that I was SRE manager and usually leading and helping many other teams in Oracle start with on-call and help other managers manage and usually start on-call in developers team that's never been on-call before. We always discuss how to do it. Yeah? And I think the key factor is training. Yeah, and you have to be very careful who can join on-call or not. If you have quite a big team, you can choose people. There are usually some people that, for example, if they have problem with sleeping, they cannot be on call and wake up. That can be quite disaster in their health and other things. There are exceptions, but the main thing is some fear from and imposter syndrome about on call, and that can be prevented with good training. Real house trainings that I usually simulate incidents and you have someone. And what is important, I think, in designing on-call in general is very good escalation. You have to be comfort with escalating to someone else, and they have to be okay with that helping to you. And this trust between, for example, juniors on base level and some always have some more experience on some escalation level who can always help you. It's good safety net for many people.
Yeah. May I address it a little bit? Because I think that Ladia kind of mentioned on-call, the on-call part of this question. I think my take on this question would be, and don't take me wrongly, but there's something wrong. There's something wrong with the architecture, with the deployment, because people shouldn't be stressed about that. And whatever might be wrong. It's a wrong architecture or too complicated. There is not a good process. It's not automated. It's not reliable. And then maybe something is wrong with the culture. I've been in many teams where people just assume you are a superhero when it comes to Linux. And you know every df-h and du-f and whatever is there. I'm not, for instance, right? So I frequently need to look up things, So that would be my take, that if that happens, if somebody is really stressed about this, have a look at your processes and have a look at your culture.
You want to add something?
I wanted to add tooling. I mean, Karmi mentioned it, but specifically, you are in control of the tooling that you provide to your on-call engineers. So if they don't feel safe operating the environment, that there's a chance that you can improve, you can bring some tools that will make it easier for them, tooling and documentation. And if they're still unsure, then as Ladja said, if you have a bigger team, then you can basically have people choose. But if you provide them a safe space to operate so that they feel okay to troubleshoot, to debug things in production, if you provide them good tooling, then I'd say most of the people would be willing to do this.
I agree with all that, but I want to actually add a sort of a slightly different point of view. For me, the run it part is, it starts with merging, usually. And then it's like almost like, let's say, maybe not merge, but maybe it's when you hit some deploy button or something, you start deploying. That's the part where the run it starts, from my perspective. And I think, as it was already said, it should be simple. It should not stress you out. If that's stressful, then apparently you have a gap and you have to fix it, right? My first boss had this. Maybe not correct, not 100% correct, but approach to it that was like, if you drink 5 beers, you should be still able to deploy with no problem, right? That was the measurement of most of the things, was like operational procedures. You're drunk, you should be able to do it. It either fails and runs everything is still fine, or you succeed. Basically, that level of skill was needed. And it was, he was testing it sometimes.
And that's how you drop a production database.
Yes, exactly. So you don't get access to these things, right? Like, you make it safe. It's one part. And the other part, I think most of the time, it's one of the benefits I see is that if you learn all the things that you need in order to succeed in this environment, you become a better developer because you better understand what you're developing for and how it's going to be used and stuff like that, right? So that's, I think it's basically most of the stress comes from not knowing what's going to happen and how it's going to work. So it's like, if you do it 2 or 3 times and then you shadow someone and see how things are done, most of the time the stress is not there anymore. Especially if you have, like, as Ladja mentioned, escalation paths, right? I think that's something that can be trained, basically, and it's worth training it.
Yeah, and I think the real training have some real scenarios, for example, from some previous incidents, and how train people on that. It's very useful. Or if you introduce some new technology, that's quite useful to make, for example, some other team to make them some issues, some scenario that something broke and they have to fix it by the documentation that other team doing. And for example, I work in product board and we have 2 infrastructure teams there and I lead one, and the other team prepare the HashiCorp Vault for whole company. They prepare documentation and we make that house day, training day. The other team have to resolve the incident, yeah. And we learn too many things in a few hours, fix the documentation and all that things, and it was super useful before we go to production. And it was nice experience and can be done in many different ways.
May I emphasize something? Because what Nadia said was really important, the tooling and the tooling part. And to me, as I read that question, sorry, that emergency documentation and how to do that.
Yes, I wanted to get there. Yes.
What?
Cool. It was exactly, I wanted to pick it up.
That concept. So I think that tooling is much more important in this sense, actually, because frequently, and you know, it was in infra at Elastic as well, you hear something like, you should write it down, you have to write it down, we should write it down. Nobody writes it down. If they do, they don't like it, writing it down. And then it goes out of sync with the world anyway. In my experience, it just doesn't make any sense to do that, with one big exception, and that's postmortems, which Ladia mentioned. Postmortems are super useful, and that's, you know, topic for another half an hour. But tooling is important, because if you have good tooling, and with tooling I mean also logs, you know, and dashboards and all that, and you can actually understand what went wrong, you can see what's happening in the infrastructure, then you don't need emergency documentation, because that's your answer then.
I might disagree a little bit.
I disagree too.
Okay. Bring it on.
Go ahead.
So if I am about to choose between tooling and nothing at all, then I would put the documentation in the middle. So of course you can have fantastic ideas on automating things, on putting together scripts that will do stuff for me, but writing a few notes on the way as I'm resolving an incident can go a long way. So, and that already constitutes your documentation. To answer that question, though, I think a very important thing is to note that you don't create emergency documentation when you're actually trying to solve the emergency. You might want to make a few notes, but try to focus on actually resolving or at least mitigating the issue before trying to come up with the whole process and tooling to go with it. But yeah, I think documentation is pretty important. I do agree that it gets out of date and that it needs to be maintained, but I think that also boils down to the culture of the on-call. If I find something wrong with the run book, if I find something wrong with the documentation when I need it, then it will be the first thing that I do once I have mitigated the problem to go and fix it.
I will put it this way. When there is a novel problem, and you see that like your page or something, you're the one who should fix it, and there's no information, you fix it and you write down roughly how you fixed it. It's better, and then you're leaving the space better than it was. If you have time and it's a way how you encode that, write it somewhere like, you know, fix it forever, cool. If not, at least you're leaving the trail for someone else. If it happens again, at least something. It might be out of sync, but it gives you like maybe some context, maybe, oh, this is the stuff I could try and see if it works or not, and
yeah,
stuff
but
like that.
That's more like the postmortem, right?
Yes.
That was the exception
Yeah, so
I made there.
Yeah, so I think the emergency documentation is something like FAQs. You don't write them up front, ever, because FAQs written up front are the questions nobody asks, right?
Shouldn't be more as runbooks for specific alerts, the emergency documentation?
That's how you build. Yeah, yes, emergency documentation equals, in my view, like a runbook, right? In the operations lingo, it's called runbook. That's the stuff. That's basically the procedure you follow to fix things. And from my perspective, you start with nothing, then you have a really bad document. Maybe third time you have a really good document, and the fourth time is like, hey, it happens so often that we should really do something about it, and basically encode it either in the tool or fix the problem that the software has, right? Like, I don't know, like this. So I give you some specific example, which I really abhor, is horrible, but there are teams in which I've worked with where when they run out of space, they go and delete some files. And I asked them many times, like, why is not, like, you check if there's space and then you delete it automatically? Because it's always like TMP files and you do that and fixes it. And they are doing that for the last 3 or 4 years, still manually. And it's still not even really documented. They always ask, like, what am I supposed to do? Oh, you go and delete this. So that's the anti-pattern. Write it down.
But Heroku restart your Dinos every day. That was, and if you know Monit, my nice tool that running my VPS, that's restarting wrong processes every day, I think. It's and cleaning space.
Yeah, I think that we have a question about that, you know, just on the top about the observability part. So,
yes, what do you think about observability In my experience, typically SREs say they don't have time for that. Should a team be dedicated on observability?
I think it's very wrong if SRE thinks that it's not their priority observability. That's something really wrong with SREs. If you look on SRE pyramid, the observability is the main things there. And yeah, if you need special observability team, it's not about using observability, but that you're running your observability platform internally for costs or some specific compliance reasons. Yeah. That should be observability. Who making the platform? But SREs are about that. Make visibility in your production, make correct dashboards and alerts, primary alerts, and make all observability solution working for them to debug things and for people on call that easy find the problem. Yeah.
Well, honestly, I think like in most cases so far what I've seen is SRE is like, oh, there are devs and there are SREs and they do that and we do this, and you have this silo and it's not really the same people, and there's very often a disconnect and not enough feedback loops.
And actually, I would say that the observability part can kind of bridge this distinction. It can tear down the wall, because observability data are really interesting even for developers, the people who build it, even if they don't run it, And I'm, even more extreme than Ladja was. I mean, without observability, you have nothing. Like, that's crazy. If the process is to just, SSH into a server and randomly delete some logs, whatever is larger, that's crazy. That's a crazy part then.
Yeah, sure. That's exactly my thing. I remember all times that I was super happy if I have RSys log and all web servers I have on one place that I can use grep. That was the piece of art in 2000 or something like that. Yeah, but current observability platform as Datadog or something that they are super good if you instrument your application, especially now with open telemetry. You can easily have control on your observability data. You can easily use multiple observability platforms that for different reasons, and you can have very good insights on many levels, metrics, traces, logs, what you need. Yeah.
I mean, even from the name, right, the reliability engineer, how do you know it's reliable if you don't see what's going on, right? How you can tell?
You assume.
Well, but then you're maybe not a reliability engineer anymore, and you're assumptions engineer.
Yeah, hope
Actually,
is
like all of them are.
Yeah, hope is not strategy. Yeah.
And also, if you don't measure it, you don't know what you're dealing with, right?
And you can't manage it, right? Like usual, like you don't measure it, you don't manage it, and therefore, basically, don't know what's going on.
I have one thing to add, if I may. I mean, I personally am an SRE, and I'm crazy about dashboards. But if people are looking for excuses not to touch them, then again, you might have a problem in the tooling. These things should be easy. Everyone should feel comfortable updating a dashboard or adding some instrumentation to your code. So if it's not easy, then make it easier, and you will have people, more interested.
I will go with the next question.
Yeah, I wanted to actually address it. I wanted to ask this anonymous, so I don't know who asked. It's not a question, it's a statement, which I think is controversial, at least to me. I think it's good to experience firsthand in startup, etc., but not sustainable nor effective for bigger projects. And I would like to ask, like, what is a bigger project? Because I've worked with people on really large projects, and they're still doing it. So
yeah, and how we phrase the you build it, you run it is from AWS. Yeah, and I think they are quite big. So yeah, and they are using all services running. You build it, you run it. Yeah, that I think that's quite big.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask, like, what's the bigger, like how large it should be? I think the difference is that, for example, in my experience, you sort of have, for example, certain like subject matter experts for certain areas. If it's really goes wrong, and like the average engineer can't really solve it at the point. because he's working mostly on the other components, then yes, you pull people in. You basically page someone in and escalate and ask for help. But most of the time, if you're doing it right, you don't get that many pages. You don't get a page. I mean, like something went wrong and somebody needs to attend to it, and you build the tools, automations. You improve the architecture so that it actually is able to handle it. So it's still sustainable. The thing is that bigger project doesn't. If bigger project equals more people doing operations, then you're not doing it the right way. You want to maintain sublinear scaling in that case.
I think something that is much easier in a startup setup, if you have just a smaller team, is that the communication is just easier. You essentially shove those people in the conference room and then they figure things out, and everyone is kind of aware, everyone is pretty much understands the high-level concepts. If you have a bigger team, if the org grows larger, then the communication, the handovers, the unpopular documentation, those might actually help keep people interested, keep them feeling the ownership. I think the ownership is extremely, or is much harder to foster in a bigger org, and it's important to put effort in it, to put attention to that one.
Yeah, and what I see the biggest issue with, for example, if you can introduce SRE in your company, and I am advising a few companies about that, it's culture change. Yeah, it's not about size of company, but how you can implement some culture changes in your company. And sometimes the not super big companies, they are quite good structured and have some structure. The biggest issue is some mid-sized company it's not still in some shape, that its culture is not super strong in some ways, and it's biggest problem for these changes. Yeah, it's not really what, from my experience, the technical issues, but more is culture, people problem, about communication, about changes that for everyone who is involved is quite big change on their personal lives and other things. And this should be good communicated from management, and all the process can be quite painful. And it's good to have time for that. We discuss on our previous panel discussion in, for example, Atacama here in Prague. They are starting doing SRE, and they give time almost year to properly make it in company. And I think it's quite important that they train everyone, and they really ask people what is problem and how to do it. That's big culture change.
It relates to a question which Thomas asked. It's like how to change mindset from works on my machine to own it end to end. Right? What would you suggest? From my perspective, it's like it depends what you're after, but it's sort of like a definition of done. From my perspective, either works end to end or it's not finished. So
I would again say it's a question of architecture. You know, if you can run the same project on your own machine end to end with whatever it is, possibly Docker, but whatever, then there's something strange about the whole thing, to me at least.
Yeah, I am big fan running on my machine still, but yeah, currently with Docker and Kubernetes running on my machine, it's almost identical environment as in production. And that's always I look on that, and yeah, sometimes it's hard, especially that you have to deal with clouds, and they have some specifics that are not easy understand or discover the issues that you don't see on your machine, and see only in platform, special RBAC and identities and similar things that are quite too hard to do it. Yeah. But yeah, I think as you mentioned, the real done is running in some environment, at least staging that are very similar to production, or running in production. That should be always aim for developers.
And into that definition of done, you can then shove more things, such as observability, documentation, making sure that the customers know, I'm sorry, I just keep on talking about documentation today, making sure that the people can actually use the feature that you brought. So being done should mean many more things than just merging your pull request to the main branch.
Yeah, and measure everything that you know if really someone using your feature, for example. Or you forgot some feature toggle and there are no one see that feature. Yeah?
This touches on the next question I see, and it's like recording of deployments to prod. Anybody using it for evidence and understanding issues later during the retro sessions? I actually think if you need to record your deployment, you're doing something wrong because it should be repeatable and you should be doing the same thing every time. Unless it's something really extreme, and then it shouldn't be one person doing it, right?
But you have a log, like preferably, so we could consider that.
Yes.
We could consider that.
And
recording.
audit logs for compliance reasons. You have all informations there, but yeah, it depends on your size. Yeah.
I mean, there's an exception. Might be a kind of strange migration, database migration, a complete switch of technology, something like that. There, I would say it's super useful to have some kind of recording, textual, visual, for that. But those, as Vilda said, should be exceptions. It should be normal, like git push.
And then you wait, and it happens or does not happen, and that's it, right? Like.
Yeah, we are getting quite run out of time. That maybe we can take the next question. That
Yes,
I really
we're taking
like
questions all the time.
Yeah, okay, that we go
Right.
with establish on-call and how you deal with compensations.
Yes, of course, money.
Yeah,
That's the
money is
question.
important.
Money solves it, so what's the problem?
Yeah, you can see different approach, and usually the right approach is you just follow the law. Yeah, and that you follow the local law. That's quite the issue. Yeah, that's in Oracle. That's we mentioned that we started, and you get the on-call, and you are in US, you don't get any money. Yeah, you just get on-call, and after 20 years, you are Java developers, and just managers send you from next week you are on-call, and no compensation. That's quite pity, yeah. There are some companies in US that give you some compensation, but it's not mandatory. They don't have any regulations about that, and it's quite painful. And for example, I have teams across US, Great Britain and Prague, and in the whole European Union in that time, we have regulations, we have quite nice, I think, the laws that figure out how compensation have to be for your employees, and works very good. And I think you can make it better if you want. I, for example, very like how Seznam.cz doing that. Here they give you extra vacations for something. That's, I think, much more better than money in for many developers. That you have more free time, but you need to have capacity in the team. Yeah, that many people are on vacation, but the money is always good too. Yeah, that's.
I mean, you can model it like, like emergency doctors have it, and there's like a lot of examples where it kind of works, right? Like there are some shifts, you're compensating for being ready, and then you're compensating if something really happens, right? And the form of compensation could be, you get a day off if it's horrible, for example, right? Like it really depends on culture in the team, what people want, and so on. But without compensation, it really sucks.
Yeah, I think it's good if you have choice. That's always good. And there is from our law, there are two possible ways how to do it. You can have some rate per week or something per day of on call, or you can have exact calculated hours. Yeah, and you have different size for standby and different for overtime and over weekend and Sundays extra. Yeah, some extra money that, for example, Oracle follows.
So the other thing is, you could be on call and nothing happens. That's fine, right? Like nobody's bothered. But if you're woken up like 20 times during the night, it's a big problem, and it's like even the money to come by it.
Yeah.
Because you get.
That's why it's good to have choice, and you can have.
No, and I actually think that this is something that it should be taken sort of into account from the like a management and business perspective. Is you can't really exhaust the people this way, and if you're doing it this way so that it really sucks so much, you probably need to fix it.
May I address something? There was a follow-up question which touches this about wake up at 3 a.m. and working through the weekend. The assumption I hear here from everybody is that when you're on call, it's 2 a.m. and you get waken up and you have to get up and get to your computer. This should happen once in 3 years or something like that. I mean, to me, that's a definition of correctly working processes. It shouldn't be absolutely regularly that you wake up at 2 a.m. or whatever a.m. And that's again, tooling, observability, some kind of auto-healing in whatever sense infrastructure. It should be normal that people are waking up at night because a disk space, went out. That's crazy. Don't do that.
But you don't need to wake up, but still, from our experience, Vilda can mention there are many teams, you have 200 teams, and there are quite big difference how their on-call looks like. Yeah, exactly as you mentioned, if you are on-call in YBYR in late years, you will be wake up one per year, and nobody, there are plenty of people who doesn't have any incident whole year, and we have different issue that people are not familiar with tooling and all that things. They don't have real incidents, and we have to thinking, we have to make that house days or something that they will be familiar at least one per quarter. That's the real production is in super good shape. But Vilda can mention their experience.
I think if you see that people are being woken up at 2 or 3 a.m., like 11 a.m. is probably fine, but.
No, it's not fine. Like people shouldn't be waking up in the night.
All right,
that should be the exception.
Like 11,
and that's the definition.
Hour before lunch is probably better, but yeah. What I wanted to say is that's the incentive for you to fix it, right?
Exactly.
That's the point. The whole point is if you are waking up 3 a.m., you're not doing your job right.
Or somebody else.
Or somebody else is not doing it right? And this needs to be fixed and improved. That's the idea of the feedback there.
Yes, and there is quite big issue about
I guess you have,
your manager that have to make the correct behavior and priorities for your team. Yeah?
And if it's not happening, maybe change the job.
Yeah,
honestly.
exactly.
Like sometimes it's the business is so broken that the only way out from the engineer is go somewhere else, right? I've seen that, so I've done that too, right? Just saying.
Sorry, I remember there's this team that I joined about 2 years ago, and it felt like they had this boiled frog attitude, and there was this operational review meeting that I joined, and the on-call engineer was saying, "Oh, in this past week shift, I only had 40 pages, and only half of them was in the middle of the night." And I was looking at it, and he said, "Oh, and this was a good shift. It was fine." So sometimes people just get used to horrible things because they just keep on happening, and nobody puts any attention to it. So as Vilda said, sometimes just the ways, either try to change this, but be very vocal that this is wrong, that it shouldn't be like this. And if it doesn't work, then leave.
So thank you very much. We run out of time. We have like last minute or so. Remember the questions, come and ask like afterwards. I'm happy to discuss any of the topics.
Yeah, we have own corners. If you go outside here, you find us there.
Yes. The other thing, if you're interested in this topic, is me and Láďa are doing a podcast, which is called You Build It, You Run It, YBYR, which you can find on all the platforms, where we're discussing all kinds of topics. And is there anything else we should say?
No, thanks PyCon for hosting us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank our guests. That was a pleasure for us.
And thank you for staying with us.
Yes.